Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to the 2013 census data, women make less than men in 333 out of 342 job categories. That's 97% of major occupations. A 2014 analysis published in the Harvard Business Review found that Black and Hispanic workers consistently make less than their white and Asian colleagues. A 2015 AARP report shows that older unemployed workers spend longer looking for a job than their younger counterparts. So we've got age, gender, race. A reasonable person would say that we have work to do when it comes to workplace discrimination. Now, the EEOC helps tens of thousands of individuals every year who file charges of discrimination in the workplace, but thousands more benefit from the results of the systemic program, which tries to root out discrimination that affects entire classes of workers. Back in 2006, Commissioner Silverman, who was appointed by President Bush, concluded, and I want to quote here, EEOC is uniquely equipped to combat systemic discrimination, close quote, and he made that a top priority for the EEOC. So, Chair Yang, my question for you is whether the EEOC's current focus on systemic investigations is new, or it's just a continuation of the policy begun during the Bush administration.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Our systemic work is an important part of the agency's work, and as you recognized, it has been continuing. The Systemic Task Force in 2006 recommended that we invest more of our resources on systemic cases because we can have a greater impact, and it's a particularly important role for the government to play. They also emphasized that it is important for us to use the commissioner charge and directed investigation process so that we are proactively identifying the greatest needs for our resources rather than simply being reactive, because we know that for every person that comes forward, there are many others who may not know they're being discriminated against or are afraid to do so.
So let's push on this a little. As part of your efforts to combat systemic discrimination, the EEOC has been criticized for using its authority to initiate investigations without a specific complaint from a specific worker who is directly affected. But looking at the same data that the General Counsel looked at, I noted that of the nearly 900 cases filed on the merits since 2010, only 12 were based on investigations initiated by EEOC, or just slightly over 1%. So, Chair Yang, let's focus on that 1%. In those few cases where the EEOC brings its own action without a specific employee complaint, is the Commission just duplicating what individuals should be doing on their own? Or are you following because there are specific reasons why you needed to investigate and initiate these investigations?
There is a particularly important role the government plays because, as I mentioned earlier, often individuals do not fully appreciate that they may be subjected to discrimination. We see that a lot with hiring, also with pay, where people do not necessarily know what other people are paid, but we can see from some of the charge information and our directed investigation authority where there may be a larger problem. Yeah. So we are using that as a way to invest our resources to address the larger problem.
So there's been much talk, though, about the backlog that you face. I note that back in 1980, the EEOC had more than 3,000 people working to enforce non-discrimination laws. Since then, the American workforce has expanded by nearly 50 million workers, but the number of people at EEOC who are there to enforce non-discrimination laws has been cut by more than 1,000 workers. With the number of employees down by a third, how has the EEOC's ability to launch important systemic investigations been affected?
That's an important question, and we think carefully about how to use our resources. With the limited resources we have, investing in systemic cases can be one of the most effective ways for us to use those resources, because instead of separately investigating 50 different charges, we can try to affect that practice at issue to ensure that we are preventing discrimination from going forward. So we are carefully identifying the cases that we are going to file because we know they take significant resources, But through those efforts, we are working to bring about lasting change that can help the employer build a stronger workplace and become more productive as a result.
Thank you. You know, I wish we didn't have to be here today discussing the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, because I wish the EEOC weren't necessary. I wish that all Americans could apply for jobs and go to work confident that they would not be passed over because of their age, confident that they wouldn't get lower pay because of their gender, confident that they wouldn't get worse hours because they're African American, and confident that they wouldn't be retaliated against when they ask for equal treatment. But all the independent evidence shows us that we are not there yet. Until we get there, our continued efforts to address this issue are an important part of who we are as a people. We have more work to do, including passing the long overdue LGBT anti-discrimination legislation so the EEOC can better protect people who face discrimination in the workplace because of sexual orientation. But at a minimum, we can encourage the EEOC to do the work it can to protect every working American, make sure that we all have equal opportunities on the job. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.